As we mentioned in our unfinished works video on Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice is one of our favorite books ever written.
Yeah, and because we liked it so much, we decided to watch the miniseries, the Keira Knightley movie, and the 1940 adaptation starring Sir Laurence Olivier.
And so today we're going to talk about the adaptations, what we liked about them, what we didn't like about them, and discussed how they kept faithful to it.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Aleks.
And this is In Other Works. Since we watched it first, do you want to start with the miniseries?
The miniseries is incredible.
I mean, it's got the advantage of being a miniseries, so it's got time to cover as many plot points as it can from the book, and, you know, it gives it room to be more faithful.
That is true, but Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy is incredible. It's one of those performances that made me like the book even more, because like it made me understand what the character was so much more in a truly brilliant way.
Yeah, you said that you think he's doing Mr. Darcy as autistic?
Yeah, no, I straight up think that's what he's doing, and I am an autistic person, so that made Mr. Darcy turn into this super relatable character for me.
Yeah, and I think you're right about that. I think you realize his character kind of seems to change over the course of the book. Where he is snobbish and stern and changes towards the end, where he softens and becomes a more reasonable person. Because he's doing him as autistic, he definitely becomes more likable as you go along, but that sternness is more awkwardness and a sense of discomfort with the world around him, and that does not go away when you get to the end. He's just found specific people that he can be comfortable with.
Yeah, and so I very much really heavily related to that, and hot take, Colin Firth's a great actor.
I mean, he is the standout role.
Obviously, even though Elizabeth is the main character, I think if you want one person to be the standout role, it's gotta be Mr. Darcy.
It's gonna sound crude of me to say this, but this is my one criticism of the miniseries. In the books and in the miniseries, it's talked about how, you know, Elizabeth, the main character, is attractive, but she's nowhere nearly as attractive as her older sister, Jane. And Jane is the member of the family who everybody fawns over because she's so beautiful. The actress who plays Elizabeth is way more attractive than the actress who plays Jane.
Honestly, that might just be true of every adaptation. I mean, I can understand Ferg Rosamund Pike to Keira Knightley. I don't.
But you can understand it.
To be fair, while reading the book, I definitely like Elizabeth more than Jade. I think Jade is talked about as the nicest person ever, and it's just because of that there's less to her, I guess, than anything
I think
else.
that's true. Other than that, I think the actress who plays Jane has a great handle on the character. It's not that it's because she's a minor character. She kind of is just a bit of a bland character. And
it's very intentional. I think that's part of the point, which is why Mr. Darcy sabotages things the way he does.
Yeah, because he doesn't see that Jane is actually interested in
Bingley. And I think that also adds with an autistic reading. I know they have a scene of Charlotte going up to Elizabeth and asking if Jane is really attracted to Bingley. But I think even despite that, if you look at it with an autistic reading, because the way Jane is playing a much more subtle game with it, he can't pick up on it at all because he's not the best at picking up on social cues.
Yeah, in terms of casting though, I think Collins is...
Collins is wonderful.
Yeah.
Bingley is really good. He has just this really charming guy, and it's like someone you want to be Bingley's friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Elizabeth's parents. I would say that throughout the adaptations we watch, Elizabeth's mother, every actress who's done her has basically taken the same approach. Yeah. And
it works.
For good reason. Yeah.
It's just this ridiculous lady.
Yeah.
I love her.
If you've read the book, you know that she goes from talking to her daughters about when I was young, I used to love the officers in the army and all this kind of stuff. And then when one of her daughters runs off with an officer, she's saying, I warned them to stay away from officers, that they're always trouble. And it's just like...
Or when he says that Mr. Bingley's gonna challenge Wickham to a duel and die.
Yeah.
Leave the house to Mr. Collins and they're all gonna go homeless.
Yeah. That's hilarious. But one of the things that I liked quite a bit in the Keira Knightley adaptation, it's the only one that does this. The first ball that we see them attend in Pride and Prejudice is a public ball. And then after that, it's the one that Bingley hosts. And there's a huge difference in the way they're depicted. The public one is sort of lower class. People aren't dressed as well. The building is just like a normal kind of building. It's crowded. It's not as well lit. And I really liked that sort of like showing the way the differences in society. All the other adaptations, you wouldn't know that one was a public ball and one was a private ball.
That's a good point. Production design on the Keira Knightley one's really cool. And I read one interesting thing about that one is that the director doesn't really like the fashion styles of the early 1800s. So he specifically said it in 1793, which was when Jane Austen finished her first draft of Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
So the thing about the Keira Knightley one is, I think Keira Knightley is obviously great as Elizabeth.
I do too,
Yeah.
but I think and I don't think this is necessarily her, I think it's probably what the director wanted to do. She feels more modern. Even though it's set
that's
even
true.
earlier, she feels more modern than the character in the book or the character in the miniseries.
No, you're right about that. I can definitely agree with that. It's really interesting because there's a more recognizable cast in that one. Some people in that went on to be bigger actresses, like Carey Mulligan.
Yeah, and even Rosamund Pike, I don't think was that big then. And of course, we're from Canada, so we got to...
Donald Sutherland's the GOAT.
Yeah.
Yeah, so doesn't matter how great Mr. Bennet is in the miniseries, Donald Sutherland's Donald Sutherland, so we're taking Donald.
I really liked the scene after Collins has proposed. I couldn't wait for that scene. I love it in the book. I love it in every adaptation, but I really liked it in this one.
Where they're so obviously eavesdropping?
No, not that. Where the conversation afterwards where Mr. Bennet says to Elizabeth, I'm afraid you have a bit of a conundrum. If you don't marry Mr. Collins, your mother will never speak to you again. And if you do, I will never speak to you again. I loved Donald Sutherland, the way he did that. I mean, it's great in all of them, but the Donald Sutherland one, just like, I knew the line, I knew it was coming, and it still made me laugh.
Donald Sutherland's so good in it. But there's quite a few characters who I don't like how they're done in this movie. Mr. Collins is a very good example.
Like, he's a buffoon in the book, in the miniseries, in the Olivier one, which we'll talk about. And this one, he's kind of creepy. Like, he is a buffoon, but he's also he's too, like, cloying and simpering, especially when he's addressing Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Gets under my skin.
Yeah, there's something just really icky about the way he does it. Which, to be fair, I think if this was a real-life scenario, Mr. Collins would be a creepy person.
Yeah, I think that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
I think that's the approach they decided to take with that character. I just think you're ignoring the comedy of Pride and Prejudice, which is one of the best things about it.
Yeah, he is like one of the most laughable characters ever. And it is just hilarious to watch him just buffoon around and just like, bro really thought that was a good idea. Which actually brings me to the one very unfortunate thing that I've yet to see happen in a single adaptation, because it's one of my favorite scenes in the book. Mr. Collins trying to get Elizabeth to introduce him to Mr. Darcy. Like, in the book, it's this really hilarious scene where Elizabeth is explaining that, Mr. Darcy is not the type of person that would appreciate this at all. And then Mr. Collins goes on normally I would take your advice, Elizabeth, I'd trust you so much, but I, as a clergyman, know these things. I know my way around interacting with people. And so I will not accept your advice this time. No. But normally I would. And then he just goes, makes another fool of himself. And Mr. Darcy's just like...
basically just walks away from him.
Yeah. And Mr. Collins goes back to Elizabeth and is like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. That was a very charming interaction.
I think it went very well, yeah. I think probably the Olivier one comes closest to doing that, but there isn't the conversation with them ahead of time of him wanting her to do the introduction. They just kind of bump into him and she witnesses the really awkward interaction.
And that's the talking to Elizabeth is what makes it so good. But yeah, another character I don't really like in the movie with Keira Knightley is, and this is probably going to be a really hot take, I don't like Mr. Darcy in this one very much.
No, you're right.
I don't know it's necessarily that he's a bad actor.
No.
It's just more so that I don't like the direction they gave his character.
He does a good job reciting the lines. I don't think he has a take on who Mr. Darcy is, and I think that shows a little bit.
His interpretation is just kind of this grumpy dude.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is they also switched around Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley in terms of social skills. Even and that's such a weird choice because
Even
Bingley
is still friendly and like wants
outgoing.
to reach out to everybody, but he's awkward all the time.
Yeah, he doesn't have the social skills. Whereas really Mr. Darcy's kind of the awkward one, but he's not really awkward in this movie. He's just kind of grumpy.
Yeah.
While I will say I don't like the idea of that change, it did lead to my absolute favorite scene in the movie, which is Mr. Bingley rehearsing how he's gonna propose to Jane. It's this really cute scene that really shows the friendship between Bingley and Darcy, and I love it a lot. And Bingley is, of course, being awkward as hell, and it works in the way they characterized him. And while I don't appreciate that characterization, I love that scene a lot.
The movie also goes for a lot of sort of moodiness. When Darcy proposes to Elizabeth, it's out and there's a storm and the rain, and it sets up this whole different mood that's not part of the book.
And that scene also does another weird thing where at first I thought it was gonna like save screen time or whatever, because they just had the argument with Jane, like the whole thing just discussed out in the open in this scene. And so I'm like, oh, I guess they're not doing the letter. But then they do the letter for the Wickham side of things. But like he talks about as though he's going to talk about both. And then they just have him go, it was for a friend with the whole Jane thing. And it's just like, what was the point of having it all in that scene if it wasn't to save screen time?
I mean, I guess maybe they just thought it'd be too much letter time if they did it all in a letter. I don't know.
Actually, that's another thing I really need to discuss. Wickham has no presence at all in this movie, which is unfortunate because in the miniseries, Wickham is so good. Love to hate that guy.
Yeah.
The guy who plays him is perfect scumbag.
But you can see how he's charming and all that. Like, you buy that he's charming at the same time that you think he's a scumbag, right? Like, he pulls both of those things off. And if any of you've seen Absolutely Fabulous, the actress who plays the daughter of the main character, who is like straight-laced compared to her mother's wild side, you get to see a different side of her because she plays the wild daughter, Lydia, who ends up running off with Wickham. She's great in it too. She's absolutely ridiculous, and it does show what an absolute creep Wickham is.
Yeah.
She is played as this immature girl because she is an immature girl. Mm-hmm. And Wickham is
a grown man.
Like Darcy's age, right? Mm-hmm. Like they went to school together, and he runs off with a 16-year-old girl. Just, ugh.
Which is funny because then you look at Sense and Sensibility with Colonel Brandon, and that's like the happy ending. I think it's also safe to say with why the miniseries is so much easily my favorite of the stuff is also just it has the best ensemble too.
Yeah. Not to mention you like that swimming scene.
So the miniseries for the most part is pretty faithful. But then you got this random scene where completely fully clothed, I mean he takes off like some stuff, but he's still fully clothed. Mr. Darcy just goes for a swim in a pond.
He's gone home and he doesn't know that Elizabeth is visiting his home at that time.
Yeah, and so when they run into each other, he's still wet from going for a swim.
To make him extra awkward, I guess. But it's just like something, I think it works, but it's one of the few things that they kind of just added of their own accord.
They also do, I'm very glad they did this actually. The miniseries has a lot of lingering.
Yeah.
It lets you feel, which is obviously something a movie can't do, but you get to like experience a lot of the ball. Like they'll play the full song and the whole experience of it. So you're just set in the thing. And this is why I love Mr. Darcy so much, because you see him his awkward looks at Elizabeth that whole time. You really feel them.
Yeah, that's true. That's part of the reason, I guess, why in the movie we don't see as much of Wickham, is because they need to cut something. And so they cut Wickham down quite a bit because you want to focus on the relationship between Elizabeth and Darcy. Mm-hmm. But it's so funny in the books and in the miniseries how much of their relationship is influenced by Wickham's presence. It's a really weird thing to kind of work around that. What did you think of some of the weird visual effects in the miniseries, like the lingering in the mirror?
Oh yeah, that stuff was goofy. I don't know why they did that. There's a scene where Elizabeth's looking in the mirror and then Mr. Darcy shows up in the reflection. And then there's a weird scene where she like turns around and I guess imagines Mr. Darcy standing there, and that's the still frame they end the episode on.
Oh yeah.
It's so random.
Yeah.
I'm like, why did they do that?
Yeah, it's style decisions that are a bit peculiar.
But it doesn't harm my opinion that much. It's still brilliant.
Yeah. So we haven't really talked much about the Laurence Olivier one.
And I wanted to save that for last because it feels disconnected from the other two.
It's funny, I feel like it's definitely the least faithful adaptation, but it really gets to the humor of Pride and Prejudice better than any of the other adaptations.
It understood more than any of them that Pride and Prejudice is a comedy, a romantic comedy. I know like we look at Jane Austen these days as like prestige, and like Pride and Prejudice is considered like the classic novel, but it really is one of the funniest books ever written, and that's like one of the main appeals of that. And if you haven't read Pride and Prejudice, keep that in mind, because if you were held off by that, it's so funny.
Yeah, and they capture it really well. And like I said, I think all the mothers are kind of done the same way, but they really focus on the mother in this one more, so it comes out even more, and she's so ridiculous and it's so funny.
Yeah, like the horse race that happens.
Oh yes, that's so. Yeah, the way this one starts, the mother and the daughters are in town and they notice Bingley arriving and they find out who he is, and they're like, we need to get home
before the Lucases,
because we need to get sure we get introduced to Mr. Bingley before they do. And so they get in their carriage and they're taking them home, and then the Lucases come up in their horse and they pass them, and it's this whole insane race, and it's not done for action. It is done for humor. It's just such a ridiculous scene, and it's great.
Yeah, here's the thing, and I think this is honestly more impressive than like doing a faithful adaptation. What this one does is, for the most part, it keeps the characters true to who they are in the novel while doing its own thing with them.
Yeah. Collins is as ridiculous as he is in the novel, but he is not a minister. He's just always on about Lady Catherine de Bourgh and his benefactor. And they use condescension, which the book does too, talking about her condescension. And it's so funny how that word is a positive word, like, oh.
Well, I don't think Jane Austen sees it as a positive word.
But he is using it as a positive word, and it must societally have been a positive word. Right? Like how great it is that Lady Catherine de Bourgh will condescend to be civil to the lower classes.
Yeah. But speaking of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, that leads to the one thing I don't like about this movie.
Yeah, it's my one most disappointing factor.
Which is a weird change they make. You want to talk about it?
Sure. At the end of the book, Lady Catherine de Bourgh approaches Elizabeth and tells her that it's unacceptable that she and Mr. Darcy could get married. She's demanding that Elizabeth tell her that if he were to propose, she would refuse. Elizabeth's saying, I'll make no such promise. And Lady Catherine is just can't believe that someone would refuse her, because who is this young girl to
insult
refuse
Lady Catherine de Bourgh?
Yeah, and it just shows what a horrible, a classist snob this woman is, right? In this one, that scene goes further at first, where she says that she actually still controls Darcy's income, and if he marries her, she will take away his fortune. And Elizabeth's like, I don't care. You know, I'm still not going to make any promises. And then she leaves and she runs into Mr. Darcy, and it turns out that this was all some weird plan they concocted to figure out whether or not Elizabeth was still in love with him, and her chance to assess Elizabeth's character. And she's impressed that she was not threatened by the loss of money and didn't back down to her and all this stuff.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense, because earlier in the movie, it's clear that Lady Catherine is trying to set Mr. Darcy up with her daughter. Mr. Darcy's mother and Lady Catherine always intended for their children to marry so that they could unite their fortunes and all this stuff. And now she's just happy to give that up. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit the character. It doesn't fit the character you see throughout the movie. It's just goofy and doesn't work.
At least it is funny.
It is funny,
but it doesn't make sense. But there's a lot of just completely original scenes in this. The archery scene. I like the archery scene.
Well, that's the one thing, is in this one, you have the ball at the beginning, but then Bingley doesn't have a ball. He doesn't throw a ball. He throws a garden party. So you have the scene where It's so embarrassing for Mr. Darcy, where he's like trying to school Elizabeth on archery, and he does a couple shots. He does okay. He hits the target, and then she takes it, and boom, 3 bullseyes. And it's like,
no, to be fair, I think the way he reacted is like the perfect reaction to that.
where he's like, he doesn't let his pride get the better of him.
Even though it's Pride and Prejudice, and he's supposed to be the pride.
Oh, that's funny too. He's embarrassed that he was so condescending to Elizabeth, and rightfully is like impressed with how she did, and not like his male.
He's like, I'm gonna let the ladies teach me things now.
Yeah. The relationship between him and Bingley's sister, and in this movie there's only one Bingley sister. They don't have two.
I don't think there's a second sister in the other movie too.
Yeah, you might be right. Which is it
the miniseries where her husband's Bronzion Royce just constantly asleep.
That's hilarious. So good. I think this one, it's the most clear that Darcy was never interested in her. So, like, everything she says to him, he's just like, makes it clear how much he hates her snobbery and that kind of stuff. Even though I would also say, weirdly, he is the most like the book character in that he is a snob at the beginning and realizes as the story goes on and as he gets to know Elizabeth how unjustified his snobbery is, and that isn't a good character to have. I think Laurence Olivier is the only actor I know in that one, and well, he's Laurence Olivier, right?
Yeah,
he's great.
Yeah, but it's not just that he's a great. I mean, like, I think weirdly enough, if you've seen his Wuthering Heights, even though Heathcliff and Mr. Darcy are in similar characters, you can see in that performance, oh, he'd be the perfect Mr. Darcy.
Yeah. And sure enough, he's great.
I think one bit of trivia to mention, though, one of the writers was Aldous Huxley.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we caught that in the opening credits. So speaking of Aldous Huxley, we're going to be covering Island
next week
by him.
Be sure to stay tuned for that. But back to Pride and Prejudice. In all honesty, despite problems with the Laurence Olivier movie, and despite it being not the plot really that much, I do think I prefer it to the Keira Knightley movie. I think that's going to be a bit of a hot take, but I think there is some weird stuff in the movie that I don't like.
Especially the ending. The ending to me is like you're pandering to the rom-com lover audience, and it
does not feel Jane Austen in the slightest. Yeah, that's why the Keira Knightley one's my least favorite. It feels the least Jane Austen.
For sure. Like I said earlier, with Keira Knightley being more modern, and then that ending scene of her and Heathcliff.
You just said Heathcliff!
I did. It's like that ending scene with her and Mr. Darcy, and it's like the
Mrs. Darcy.
Have you seen 16 Candles?
Yeah, bad movie.
Do you remember the final scene of 16 Candles where they're sitting on the counter?
I remember the Community parody.
Okay. The framing of the shot is pretty much identical, except they're sitting in front of a fountain outside, and they're referring to each other as Mr. Darcy and Mrs. Darcy, and having this absolutely like Jane Austen. Only call me
Mrs. Darcy when I'm really happy. Mrs. Darcy, Mrs. Darcy, Mrs. Darcy.
Yeah. Oh. It makes my stomach turn. Yeah.
That scene sucks.
Yeah. It honestly probably would knock like half a star off my rating, just that scene alone. Listen, thanks so much for watching. I would highly recommend watching any of these adaptations. They're all, even though we've been critical of the Keira Knightley one, they're all worth watching.
Yeah. It's just our least favorite of the three. I think we have the same ranking, right?
Probably, yeah. Miniseries. Best.
Olivier second.
Yeah.
Keira Knightley third.
Even though it's not as true, if I was going to say which one captures the spirit of Jane Austen the best, I might put Olivier as number one.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I'd go with the miniseries still.
Yeah. Don't forget though, you got to read the book.
Of course. Anyways, so yeah, be sure to like, subscribe, and do all those things other YouTubers tell you to do. And let us know, what's your favorite Pride and Prejudice adaptation?
Adieu.